Hello, everyone. Welcome to our chat today. We're so excited to have you with us as we dive into some fun cooking stories and tips. Let's get started. So, I recently found myself in a bit of a pickle while preparing a Caprese salad for a local siesta event. It's one of those dishes where the balsamic vinaigrette really ties everything together. Fresh mozzarella, ripe tomatoes, and basil all need that tangy, sweet finish. I was all set to drizzle on the balsamic vinaigrette when I realized I was out. Caprese salad is such a simple yet flavorful dish, and balsamic vinaigrette is the star dressing that gives it the extra zing. For those unfamiliar, balsamic vinaigrette is a blend of balsamic vinegar, olive oil, and sometimes mustard or honey. It's popular here in Washington, especially for salads and roasted vegetables, but when I went to grab it, I found the bottle empty, and I didn't have time to run out and buy more. At first I was a bit panicked, but then inspiration struck. I had some local honey and fresh berries from the siesta, so I decided to create a quick berry reduction. I simmered the berries with a splash of red wine vinegar and a touch of honey until it thickened into a rich, tangy syrup. It wasn't exactly the same as balsamic vinaigrette, but it added a fresh, fruity twist that worked beautifully with the Caprese salad. The sweetness of the berries paired well with the acidity of the vinegar, creating a unique and delicious alternative.
Wow, Emily, that sounds incredible. I love how you used what you had on hand and turned a potential disaster into something even more special. I'm curious, how did your guests react to the berry reduction?
They absolutely loved it. Some even asked for the recipe. It was a fun twist that added a little local flair to the dish.
That's so resourceful, Emily. I've never thought of using a berry reduction like that. Do you think the reduction could work with other dishes, or was it more of a one-time thing?
Definitely. I think it could pair well with grilled meats, or even as a drizzle over roasted vegetables. The key is balancing the sweetness and acidity to complement the dish.
I'm really impressed, Emily. I can't wait to try something like this with my own ingredients here in Florida. Did you find that the berry reduction had the same versatility as balsamic vinaigrette, or was it more specific to certain flavors?
It was a bit more specific, I'd say. While balsamic vinaigrette has a broader appeal, the berry reduction worked well with dishes that have a natural sweetness, or where you want a hint of fruitiness.
That sounds delicious, Emily. I'm wondering if you've tried using different types of vinegar in place of balsamic, and how they compare in terms of flavor and texture.
I have. I've used apple cider vinegar and red wine vinegar in different dishes. They're tangier and less sweet than balsamic, so they give a different profile. Balsamic has that rich, complex flavor that's hard to replicate, but these other vinegars can add a nice punch depending on the dish.
I totally agree with you, Emily. Speaking of balsamic vinaigrette, when I'm picking one out, I always look at the origin of the balsamic vinegar. Authentic balsamic vinegar from Modena, Italy is key for that deep, rich flavor. I use it mostly for marinades and glazing, especially for grilled fish here in Florida. You've got to be careful with imitations. It can be too sharp and lack the complexity of the real thing.
That's a great point, Maya. I usually buy balsamic vinaigrette for my fresh garden salads. My go-to criterion is the ingredient list. I prefer ones with minimal ingredients. Just balsamic vinegar, olive oil, and maybe a touch of mustard. Too many additives can make it taste artificial. It's the purity of the ingredients that really makes the difference, and it's so important to avoid those with added sugars or preservatives.
Absolutely, Sarah. For me, the thickness is crucial. I use balsamic vinaigrette often for drizzling over roasted veggies or even as a dip. If it's too thin, it just runs off and doesn't coat the food properly. I look for a vinaigrette with a good, thick consistency that will cling to the food, delivering a burst of flavor with each bite.
I totally get that, Differ. My focus is on the balance of acidity. A good balsamic vinaigrette should have a nice tang without being too overpowering. I use it a lot for my New York-style bruschetta, where the tomatoes and basil need that sharpness of pop, but it shouldn't drown out the other flavors. It's important to test it before buying, if possible, to make sure the balance is just right.
Those are all excellent criteria. For me, I also consider the price. A higher price often reflects better quality, especially when it comes to aged balsamic vinegar. But it's important not to assume that the most expensive one is always the best. I usually look for a mid-range option that offers quality without breaking the bank, especially for everyday use.
Speaking of alternatives, when I'm out of balsamic vinaigrette, I sometimes use the lemon herb dressing instead. It's bright and fresh, especially with my garden veggies, but it doesn't have that same depth of flavor that balsamic brings.
That's interesting, Sarah. Here in Texas, I often reach for a honey mustard dressing as a substitute. It's sweet and tangy, which pairs well with hearty salads or even as a dip for roasted chicken. However, it doesn't have the complexity of balsamic, especially the rich, slightly sweet undertone.
In Florida, a citrus-based vinaigrette is my go-to alternative. It's light and refreshing, perfect for seafood dishes, but it lacks the syrupy texture and boldness of balsamic, which makes it less ideal for certain applications like glazing.
In New York, I have used a red wine vinaigrette in place of balsamic. It's tangy and pairs well with robust flavors like steak or sharp cheeses. However, it's more acidic and lacks that subtle sweetness balsamic vinaigrette has, which can sometimes be missed.
Great suggestions, everyone. I've tried using pomegranate molasses as an alternative. It's thick and sweet with a nice tartness, somewhat similar to balsamic. However, it's much more intense, so I usually use it sparingly or dilute it a bit. It's a fun option when I'm looking to switch things up, but it doesn't have the same versatility as balsamic vinaigrette. Wow, this has been such an insightful discussion. We've talked about everything from Maya's emphasis on the origin of balsamic vinegar, to Sarah's focus on pure ingredients, Jennifer's preference for thickness, Chloe's balance of acidity, and my own thoughts on price. We also explored some great alternatives, like Sarah's lemon herb dressing, Jennifer's honey mustard, Maya's citrus vinaigrette, Chloe's red wine vinaigrette, and my pomegranate molasses. Thank you all for sharing your experiences and tips. And that wraps up our chat for today. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. We hope you've picked up some useful tips and ideas. Until next time, happy cooking.